SU fuel pumps were widely used in our classic British cars because they were perfect. They came alive electrically and topped off the carburetors for quick starts long before any mechanical pump bolted to the side of the motor would begin pumping. Also, the SU electric fuel pumps were designed to operate at the fuel pressure that our SU carburetors wanted, which was about 3 pounds per square inch, while at the same time delivering the volume that these carburetors wanted. Now, as the years have unfolded, a few things have created headaches. One, some of the people who may have been owners of some of these cars during some of those years had no idea of what an SU carburetor did or what it needed. Second, local auto parts stores rarely had replacement pumps that had the correct fittings or the correct combination of fuel pressure and fuel volume that our classic British cars wanted. The results weren't pretty. Mr. I don't know what I'm doing would decide one day that he needed a new fuel pump for his classic British car. So, he walks to the local auto parts store and he asks for a new electric pump for his car. Of course, they wouldn't have one, so he'd have to pick a substitute. That part was easy. The auto parts store had several aftermarket fuel pumps. Every one of them came with hose barbs, so you could attach them to any fuel lines in any car. Plus, the pumps they offered didn't operate at any sissy 3 pounds per square inch. Their electric fuel pumps produced a whopping 8 or 9 pounds per square inch. They were made to feed the big Holly 4-barrels in their kind. So the guy selling the non-SU pump would say something like, "These are great, I got one of these in my boat." The fact that the fancy, new, big, Mr. Big 9-pound pump was made to feed a Holly 4-barrel or was made to beat a 5, 6, or a 7-liter 8-cylinder engine was discarded as an appointment. The little 1.5 or 1.8-liter British sports car was about to learn to drink like the big boys. Well, the brand new Mr. Big pump was brought home, and then came the first challenge. The fuel lines in the British car often had threaded fittings on them, like brake lines, and they wouldn't connect to the hose barbs on a new British pump. So, well, that's no problem. Guy got under there with a hacksaw, and in 2 minutes, the problematic ends on the lines were in the trash, and rubber hoses were fitted, 4 clamps were on, and a moment later, the problem was just a memory. Now it's time for test drive. The engine was started and it sounds fine. And then something odd starts to happen. The motor begins to fumble and stutter. The air begins to be filled with the smell of raw gasoline, and then the motor stops. Cause of death? Death by drowning. And now with the motor off and the key still in the on position, gasoline starts running out of the air filters. Well, even the Three Stooges could figure this out. There was obviously too much pressure for the SU carburetors. So instead of looking for a more compatible fuel pump, a Band-Aid solution was chosen, a pressure regulator. A new pressure regulator would allow the Mr. Big fuel pump to stay in the car, and the new pressure regulator gizmo would really look cool under the hood. Now this led to a second problem. Pressure regulators have collateral issues. The biggest collateral issue is volume loss. When the regulator is choking off the fuel to reduce the pressure down to where you want it to be, it's also choking off volume. Of course, the guy in the parts store didn't say anything about that. He probably didn't know anyway. Okay? So the new pressure regulator gets put in the car. It's adjusted to 3 psi. The drowned spark plugs are pulled, dried, cleaned, and reinstalled. Fingers are crossed, and the motor is started, and ta-da! It runs great. No stumbling, no coughing, no gasoline smell, no flooding. You gotta get out of bed pretty early to defeat the Three Stooges. So let's go for a ride. The little car with the Mr. Big fuel pump and the regulator policing the pressure ran around town like a champ. Now it's time to take it up on the highway and blow the carbon out. So the car comes to the on-ramp. The man who's driving it winds up third gear trying to reach highway speed, and all of a sudden his world comes to an end as he feels the sensation of running out of gas. A quick glimpse at the gas gauge tells him, "I got plenty of fuel," but the car coasts off to the side. And then, to make matters even worse, as he rolls off to the side of the ramp and stops, the engine is idling and it's as happy as can be. There's plenty of fuel for that. The problem manifests itself as he drives around some more. The car starts and runs great around town, but whenever he tries something that demands some serious power, the pressure regulator has choked the fuel off so much that the little car can't get up and go. The gasoline in the float bowls is sucked out faster than it can be replenished. Now, the sissy little SU pump doesn't look so anemic. The original SU pump never had problems redlining the motor. It was designed and built with the ability to deliver plenty of fuel volume while at the same time keeping the pressure where the SU carburetors wanted it. This Mr. Big fuel pump was a bad choice. Now, where do we jump to today? We want our classic car to be at least as close as we can to the way that it was built. So what are we going to do if the original fuel line endings in our car were cut off? Well, first of all, a pressure regulator has no business being in the engine compartment of our car, so that's got to go away. The Mr. Big fuel pump has been problematic from the beginning. It needs to go away. Now, what are our options? If the original fuel pump in your car call for fittings like this 377-042, and those fittings were cut off, you could be in hot water. Those fittings are an odd size. Okay, you can't just call Moss and order up another set of them. Okay, another problem is that the fittings are sometimes available on fuel lines, and sometimes they're not. So the bottom line is, if your lines have been cut and this is the original kind of pump for your car, simply putting this in might not work. Now, if the original fuel pump for your car had banjo fittings, such as this 377-161, you have options. You can buy a pair of 378-125 banjo fittings and put those on, and notice they have hose barbs on the ends to receive your lines. Those in harmony with a pair of 370-050 or 350 banjo bolts, and you can actually put this pump back on into service again. Those pieces that I just showed you, along with a few washers and a few O-rings, and this pump will be up and running. The use of the 377-161 pump opens another door of possibility. Can you see how these two pumps are similar in dimension? And they're also similar in volume. The only major difference aside from the fittings is the distance from here to here and from here to here is a little different, about 3/4 of an inch. So if you originally had a pump like this and you want to modify the way that this is bolted in, you can use this pump with the banjo fittings and get your car back to having an original SU fuel pump in it again. If you're going to go that route, instead of buying the individual pieces one at a time, you can buy a 376-108 conversion kit, which is going to have the lines, the banjo fittings, the clamps, the O-rings, the washers, everything is all in here and ready to go. Now, another reason for some people not replacing their original SU pumps with a genuine SU fuel pump is the cost. SU fuel pumps are not cheap. A practical reality is if a classic British car has had its fuel lines cut and an economical alternative to buying a new SU pump is available, a lot of people are going to consider it. If the alternative offers the fuel pressure and the volume our SU carburetors want, even more people will consider it. This 377-420 facet fuel pump is that alternative. The facet pump operates at the pressure that our SU carburetors want while delivering the volume that we need to let our classic British cars get up and run as they want to. This SU pump that I'm holding here has a volume rating of approximately 15 gallons per hour. This facet pump is rated at around 25 gallons per hour. You're never going to be fuel starved. The facet pump costs about half what the SU pump costs. It comes with hose barbs, so it will fit your cut lines. It can be used in a positive ground car or a negative ground car. It works fine with traditional gasoline, with ethanol, or any blend of the two. This is a solid state unit. There are no contact points inside here. Installation, as you can clearly see, is very easy. It also has polarity protection. That means that when you're putting it in, if you put the two wires in the wrong way, inside this is circuitry to protect it. It will not be harmed. Okay? And this has no diaphragm in it. Now, does a pump like this have any negatives? Yes, it has two. The first one is this. This is not a genuine SU fuel pump. If you're restoring your car for show purposes, you'll lose points if the judge sees this pump in there. Second, the SU pump is a diaphragm pump. There's a diaphragm right in here which is moved up and down to pump the fuel. Okay? This pump is a pulse pump. Pulse pumps make the traditional thumping noises that diaphragms make, but diaphragm pumps stop pumping when the carbs are topped off, and then they just operate intermittently after that, kind of like an air compressor does. A pulse pump is like your heart. It's always pumping. There's no problem with this. It will never go above its rated pressure. But if you're used to the traditional sound of the SU pump, which comes on for a few pumps and then stops, and this one keeps pumping, you're going to notice a difference. That's not necessarily wrong, but this pump does operate differently than this one. So which is best? Which is best for your car? If your original fuel lines have not been cut, an original pump with original fittings is probably your best bet. It fits nicely, it's original looking, it's easy to do. If the ends of your fuel lines have been cut, well, then you can go to a pump which is going to use banjo fittings in a kit such as we have here. Or if you want, you have the aftermarket option of going to the facet pump as we see here. The Mr. Big pump is never going to be in your car. Irrespective of whether you use the facet or you use a member of the SU family, you're going to have the pressure you want, the volume you want, and your car is going to run just fine.